Everybody, thank you for tuning in to Paratech with Tipa TV. I'm Josh. I'll be talking to you today about a certain type of equipment that we use on a regular basis. This is a new show, so we're going to be covering a lot of different types of tools and equipment and approaches that we use in the paranormal field. We're not stating that anything we're doing is the only way to do it. We're not stating that this is either the right way to do it or the wrong way to do it. We're just saying that this is our approach. This is what we found that really works for us. And we're just sharing that information with you. Along with talking about equipment and stuff like this, we'll be covering psychology, we'll be covering spirituality, saging, crystals, pendulums. I mean, this is going to cover a wide variety of things, but we're also going to explain the technical aspect of the approach that we utilize or that we feel is a good approach. With that being said, this episode we are going to talk about one of the things that I am most popular for, flashlights. Flashlights is something that I've used for many and many years. And when I first started using them, I heard a lot of feedback of why people don't believe that they're a good tool to use as far as the paranormal. People will say things like vibration will make them turn on, which is true. You just saw it yourself there. They'll say that temperature fluctuations will cause them to turn off and on, so if they get hot or if they get cold, expand and contract of the metal could cause it. Some people saying that the power in the battery will build up a charge, and once it's high enough it'll kick it on until it depletes, then it'll turn it back off. I've heard a lot of different thought processes to why people don't think that flashlights are really a good tool to use. I personally disagree. Keeping in mind that it is true that vibration can affect them and different external sources can affect the way that the flashlights turn off and on. It's not just that they turn off and on, but it's how you utilize it and how you communicate with it to verify whether or not you feel like you're communicating with something versus talking to just a flashlight that's turning off and on by itself. Just so you understand, these are standard Maglites, mini Maglites that you could buy just about anywhere. Any hardware store, anything like that. There's been no modification done to them. These are not the LED ones. I have not tried this with the LED ones yet, but I will. But with these, there's no modifications that have been done to these. And I have actually talked to people who thought I did, dismantled it just to show them that it's just a flashlight. The way that we work these flashlights is we turn them on to where the light just barely comes on, and then we slowly back it off until where the light bulb just barely shuts off. So it's right there on the edge of being off and on. There you go, just like that. So it's more a matter of, again, how you're communicating with them and what you're perceiving that their responses are that are coming from them. One of the things that I'd like to do is I don't just use one. I prefer to use at least 2 or 3 different flashlights, all at the same time. For one, if one is a little bit harder than another, it gives them more of a variety of which one to work with. For 2, if one of the batteries go dead, it still has other ones to work with. But I think the most important one is the way I conduct questions is usually at first I'll just set them up and I'll talk and I'll ask questions. You know, is there anybody here with me? If you are, turn on the light. Sometimes the light will turn on, sometimes it won't. And after a few questions and I see that the lights are triggering off and on, and I feel like there might be something here and it might be worth pursuing a little bit more, then I'll be more specific. I'll talk to whatever energy is around me and I'll say, I'm going to make this a little easier for me to understand. So when I ask you a question and your answer is yes, what flashlight will you turn on that represents yes to me? And if it works, one of the 3 flashlights will turn on to represent yes. And then I'll ask it to turn it back off again. And now I ask, if I ask you a question and your answer is no, what flashlight will you turn on to represent no, so I understand that that's your answer? More often than not, it'll pick a second flashlight and it'll turn that one on. Now the third one is pretty much a wild card. You could use it as an I don't know, or I don't want to tell you, or whatever. You know, you could decide what you want to use the third one for, but for me, I like to have at least 3 of them. Some of the things to be aware of is when you do this, you want to make sure you have fresh batteries, especially if you're in a cold environment, because the batteries will drain fast turning off and on. Another thing we notice too is that when we feel like we're getting a lot of constant activity, or we're getting a lot of responses that really seem to be spot on, the flashlights seem to get extra cold. I mean, we use these in the middle of winter outside. We did a session, and when we picked it up, it was colder than everything around it. So, I mean, it does draw a lot of energy, and it does get really cold. So that's another thing to be aware of. But when you're communicating with them, you establish a yes light, a no light, and a wild card light. So I don't know, or I don't want to answer you. And while you're asking questions with it, if you notice just one light is coming on but the other ones aren't, you can request it to turn on a different light. And if it can, sometimes it will. If it can't, it may turn on the same light that it's been using the whole time. Sometimes with these flashlights, it may be able to work one, or the spirits may be able to work with one of them, but they can't work with all of them. Sometimes you have to adjust them a little bit more to make it a little bit easier for them to do it. Some people I have known have actually taken the top off, removed the O-ring so it spins a lot more freely. I personally don't like doing that. I don't want to modify these flashlights in any way, shape, or form. It's just how you buy it at the store. That's how it's used. But communicating with them and having them turn off and on, that's really cool too, but that still doesn't mean you're actually talking with a spirit, or you're talking with a ghost, or you're doing anything like that. Again, you might just be talking to a flashlight. So your line of questioning has to be more specific, and for people who are new to doing this approach, some of the things that I notice that they forget is you have to be specific with yes or no questions. So they'll ask, well, what's your favorite color? It's not going to really be able to tell you its favorite color. Or how old were you when you passed away? It's not really going to tell you. But there is an approach you can take with the flashlights to ask those questions in a way that it has a chance to respond. So say, for example, we ask the flashlights, when I ask you a question, your answer is yes. What flashlight will you turn on that represents yes? Say, for example, this far one over here turns on. So you got the wild card over here. We'll say that's yes, no, and the wild card. So what you could do with the wild card is say, okay, I'm going to start counting, and when I hit the number of how old you are, turn on that light. Okay? And you could start off with, is it 10 or younger? Right? If the light doesn't turn on, or if the no light turns on, then you could ask, is it 20 years or younger? Maybe the yes light will kick on. So you could start counting backwards from 20. 29, 28, 27, and wait for that light to kick on. If it kicks on say like 23, you could say, okay, so to confirm your answer was 23, turn on the yes light and see if that yes light will kick back on. Now, a lot of this sounds really questionable if it actually happens or not, but I can guarantee you firsthand it happens. And they do start answering. Keep in mind that whatever you're communicating with isn't there just for your sheer entertainment. So if you're going to be asking it questions, if you're going to be entertaining, or if you're going to be interacting with it, you need to have a purpose of why you're interacting with it. Is there anything around here you need me to find? Okay, you're offering to give it some help by finding something that was hidden. All right. Is there a message that you need delivered to somebody? Maybe. Do they just want to tell their story? Then you could use an audio recorder and have it tell the story into the audio recorder. The nice thing about the flashlights, though, is they're more of an instant response to the questions you're asking. They are really nice, but like I said earlier, sometimes the batteries go dead really fast, even with fresh batteries. There is devices you could buy at your local hardware store that can actually test the strength of your batteries. So instead of just replacing good batteries, you could actually put them in here, test the voltage to make sure that the batteries are still good or not, and that way you're not burning through a lot of batteries you don't need to be. Very nice tool to have. So that light turned on, but it's probably because I just sat this down on the counter. So again, vibration can control it. So another good piece of advice is when you're setting up flashlights, try to set it somewhere where there's not going to be a lot of vibration. If you're in a building with concrete floors, put them right there on the ground. If you're in a hallway, space them out in the hallway so you can see them the lights turning on closer to you or going farther away from you. It's, another nice approach that sometimes has spooked me out pretty good because it seems like something is getting closer to me, but I can't see what it is. I just see the flashlights. But also keeping them clean, keeping them well maintained. Obviously, when you're not using them, take the batteries out. Don't store them with the batteries inside. What can happen is the batteries can start to leak. It can get really corrosive inside, and the springs and everything inside will just get destroyed, and then you'll end up having to buy a new flashlight. It's not always the funnest thing to do. You can do this with other flashlights as well, just because I personally prefer mini mags. Any kind of a flashlight where you could unscrew the back, or you could unscrew it enough to just be right on the cusp of off and on. Try it out. It's up to you. That's the nice thing about this is that this works for me, but you might find something that works a little bit better and easier for you. Another cool thing about flashlights too is not just having them turn off and on, but you could actually request the entity or energy to move the flashlight. Since it's round, and if you have it sitting on a hard enough surface, you can actually get them to start rolling on their own. And believe it or not, that has happened quite a few times for me. And when I'd take it and I'd put it back and I'd ask it to roll the opposite direction, it would roll the opposite direction. So even though they are just a flashlight, if you utilize them in a very wise way, you can take the approach of actually use them for communication tools for spirits in the area. Again, granted, vibration can cause them to turn on if it's a hard enough vibration. Temperature fluctuations, if it gets really hot, gets really cold, that can turn them on. The power inside the battery, getting to a surface charge and then depleting itself, that can actually play a part with it. But when you're using them in a way that you're interacting with them and saying, if there's a spirit in the room with me right now and you would like to communicate with me, turn on a light. And it could turn on a light and say, I'd like to confirm that was you saying yes, and turn on a second light. A second light will turn on. Another way you can actually do sessions with it is if you're asking it a question and it seems like it's answering, but you have doubts about the response you got, you can actually tell it, I'm not sure that that answer was very clear, so can you make the flashlight flash 2 times? Sometimes that flashlight will turn off and on 2 times to give you that answer you're looking for. Now, we know we have activity here in our studio. We've talked about it, and we actually have uploaded videos before in the past. Talking to you right now, we've never done a whole lot of this. We haven't done a whole lot of this here in the studio, but there was one night when we saw a lot of stuff moving around and whatnot, and I was watching a comedian act on the YouTube. So we decided to set up the flashlights in the other room, but where we could see the light. And while we were watching the comedy show, every time he got to his punchline or to a really funny section, the flashlights would start going like they were laughing. Like they were laughing to the comedian's jokes. It's like they were enjoying the comedy show. If you can turn that light back off for me, I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you. And hey, keep it off, please. And be polite. Thank you and please goes a long way. I mean, demanding it kind of gets annoying after a while, not just for the spirits, but for the other people in the room. If you show respect, if you interact in a way that is there to learn and to talk and to possibly help, you're more likely going to be getting responses from them. But it does take time to acquire the skill. It does take time to be able to train your mind not to think that every time the flashlight turns on by itself, oh, it's a ghost doing it, because it's not always a ghost doing it. They have to figure it out just like you do. And depending on some of the places you go, if you go in there and say, hey, I set a flashlight on the counter, go ahead and go over and turn it on, they may not know what a flashlight is. Some places they used to use the term torch. Hey, I set a torch on the counter. Can you turn on the torch for me to let me know you're here? That may be an easier term to call it than a flashlight, because that might be what they know it as. Nice thing about these is flashlights / torches have been around for a really long time. So a lot of the old spirits can still relate and identify with what they are. And, it's something to keep in mind. Another experiment, if you're out, by yourself, or you're doing the flashlight session and nobody else is really doing it, another interesting experiment is to write down your question. Instead of saying it verbally, write down your question and then record what happens. Because sometimes I believe whatever you're communicating with knows what you're going to say before it actually leaves your mouth. It knows what you're thinking, and it'll immediately answer your thought before you verbally ask the question. If that's true, can you turn that light back out for me on the count of 3? I said that was a yes, right? Okay, 1, 2, 3. Now there was a little bit of a delay there. You can pursue it further if you want to say, hey, I noticed you didn't shut off by the time I got to 3. Was that because it was too hard for you to turn on a yes light? Or, however you want to. Just keep in mind that it is another tool that you can carry around with you. Nice thing about these tools is they could serve a secondary purpose too. If your main flashlight dies, you always have a backup light so you can continue forward, or you have enough light to leave where you're going. So, it is nice that they're universal, they're lightweight, they're easy to pack away, and they're pretty durable. And I've actually dropped them in water before, and if you get them quick enough, you're fine. Just don't let them stay submersed. But I mean that's what I can think of right now as far as the flashlights are concerned and how we utilize them. Some of the approaches we take, if you watch through some of our past videos, there are a few episodes where you see us pull these out and we use them for communication. Sometimes it really seems to interact with us, sometimes it doesn't really seem to be convincing. But that's how we do our approach. That's how we work with our angle. We like that instant notification. So, and it's kind of cool that whatever is around right now is actually using them a little bit while I'm explaining it to you, so you can see them turn off and on. There's no vibration on the table when they just did that because nothing's touching it. But it was really, really nice of them to do that. And if there was something turning on these lights, I want to thank you. I just want to know if you could turn on one of the lights one more time so I know you understand I'm grateful that you turned them on for me. I'll give you the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. There you have it. It doesn't always work. Sometimes it does. So if you guys have anything that you'd like for us to cover or talk about, let us know in the comments below, or send us a message on our email account, tipatvofficial@gmail.com, and just use the header Paratech so we know what the email is about. And if you have any more questions about the flashlight, feel free to send me a message. Feel free to let me know what your questions are, and I'll try to get back to you and answer them as they come in as well. And again, it may not be for everybody, but some people I think would really benefit from just utilizing something as simple as a flashlight for communication. So with that being said, thanks for tuning in, thanks for watching this episode, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye.